There are some nights the soul never forgets. Nights that smell like smoke, money, and fear. For Aria Winters, that night came when she finally realized the man who'd promised to protect her was the one selling her off like she was nothing. 19 years old, barefoot on an auction block in a basement that stank of cigars and sweat. Her adoptive father, Richard Winters, didn't even look at her. Just sat there in his tailored suit, flicking ash into a crystal tray, while strangers with glowing eyes bid for her like she was a prize he'd grown tired of. The gavel came down. $5 million. And when Aria lifted her head, blinking through tears, she saw the man who'd bought her. Cale Thorne, the Alpha King, the most feared creature in the Northern Territories. A ruler so powerful that even other alphas lowered their eyes when he entered a room. They said he'd once torn his own council apart for defying him. They said he didn't have a heart. But when his molten gold eyes met hers, the whole room fell silent. Every breath, every sound vanished, like the world itself was holding still. And then, with a voice that carried centuries of loneliness, he whispered, "It's you, after 200 years of searching. It's finally you." In that instant, Aria's life stopped belonging to her past. This is the story of the girl who was sold like property and became the obsession of a king, of betrayal so deep it scarred generations, and a love so destined that even death waited for it. This is Aria's story, and it begins in the darkest place imaginable. Before we step into Aria's world, I want to know where my pack is watching from. Drop your city and country in the comments below. And if you're new here, welcome to the Alpha's Romance Library, where broken girls become queens, and alphas learn what it means to truly worship. Hit that subscribe button, because once you start this story, you won't want to stop. Now, let Aria's nightmare begin. The air in the basement was thick with cigar smoke and fear. Sweat rolled down the walls, catching in the flicker of yellow bulbs that buzzed like dying insects. Aria Winters stood barefoot on a wooden platform, her white dress clinging to her trembling body, her wrists raw from the ropes that had once bound her. She was 19, too old to be naive, too young to understand how cruelty could wear a familiar face. For 12 years, Richard Winters had been that face. Her savior. Her father. The man who took her in after her parents' tragic death in a so-called rogue attack. He'd raised her in a mansion with marble floors and crystal chandeliers, where silence was the only thing she'd ever been praised for. She'd believed she owed him everything. Until tonight. Now he stood in the shadows at the back of the room, watching her through a cloud of smoke, his hand resting lazily on a glass of whiskey. He didn't look angry or regretful. He looked satisfied. Paid. 2 wolf enforcers flanked her, both towering, both unmoved by her quiet pleas. Her throat was hoarse from screaming hours ago, when she'd first been dragged here. Now she just whispered his name, like a prayer that had long since lost its god. Dad. He didn't even blink. The auctioneer's voice sliced through the silence, slick and practiced. Lot 27. Human female, 19, unbonded. Perfect for companionship, service, or, he smirked, private collection. Laughter echoed from the dark. She could feel their eyes crawling over her skin. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. The door behind her was locked, guarded. The audience before her wasn't human. They could smell fear like perfume. Bidding started at 50,000, then 100, 200. The numbers climbed, each one another nail sealing her fate. Her gaze darted across the crowd until she found him. Richard, her savior turned executioner. He was counting cash while her life was being sold by the pound. That's when something inside her broke. The last piece of trust, the last shred of love, it snapped clean. The air changed then. A low growl rippled through the room, silencing laughter. The lights dimmed as though the shadows themselves bowed in fear. Every alpha in the room went still. Heads lowered. Even the auctioneer froze mid-sentence. Then he appeared. Cale Thorne, the Alpha King. He filled the doorway like a storm given form. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in black. His presence pressed against the air, heavy, ancient. Every step he took made the floorboards groan. His eyes caught the light, molten gold, bright enough to burn. He didn't look at anyone else, just her. Aria felt it before she understood it, a pull, sharp and undeniable, as if something deep inside her recognized him. Her breath hitched, her knees weak. The auctioneer's voice shook. Your Majesty, we weren't informed. How much? Cale's voice was low, gravel roughened by power. Current bid is 800,000. 5 million. The number hit like thunder. The room went dead silent. Even the bulbs stopped buzzing. Key cash, Your Majesty. Kyle's gaze didn't leave hers. Now! The gavel fell with a trembling hand. Sold! To His Majesty, Alpha King Cale Thorne. Aria's legs gave out. The guards caught her before she hit the floor, but Cale was already moving. He climbed the stage with a speed that made the guards recoil. His growl shook the walls. Touch her again and I'll rip your arms off. They scattered like mice. Then he was kneeling before her, this terrifying king, his hands surprisingly gentle as he lifted her chin. Her vision blurred through tears. His thumb brushed one away, and she heard his breath hitch. It's you, he whispered more to himself than to her. After 200 years of searching, it's finally you. She tried to speak, but her voice was gone. He looked broken, this godlike creature everyone feared, broken in awe. She didn't understand. Couldn't. All she knew was that her life had just changed again, but this time it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the beginning of something ancient. Kyle's coat fell over her shoulders, warm and heavy, smelling of pine, smoke, and rain. He turned to the crowd, voice sharp as steel. The auction is over. No one dared breathe. Then, without another word, the Alpha King of the Northern Territories lifted the human girl who'd just been sold and carried her away. Through the silence, past her trembling father, past the men who had bid for her, and as the basement doors slammed shut behind them, the air seemed to whisper what no one else dared say aloud. The king had found his Luna. The car ride felt like a dream Aria couldn't wake from. Black leather, tinted windows, and silence so heavy it pressed against her skin. She sat curled in the far corner of the limousine, clutching the edge of Cale's coat around her shoulders like a lifeline. The warmth from it still lingered, the scent of pine and cold iron clinging to her like a ghost. Outside, the city blurred past, neon lights giving way to endless forest and winding roads that climbed into mist-shrouded mountains. Every few minutes, she stole a glance at the man seated across from her. The Alpha King, Cale Thorne. He hadn't spoken since the auction. He sat in stillness, one elbow on the armrest, his golden eyes fixed on the dark window, as if seeing something far beyond it. His presence filled the space, calm but dangerous, like the air before a storm. Aria's throat was dry. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions, why he'd bought her, what he meant back there, what he was going to do with her. But her voice refused to come. Finally, Cale turned his head. The moment his gaze met hers, she forgot how to breathe. You're safe now, he said quietly. Safe. The word landed like a cruel joke. She'd been sold to a stranger for $5 million, yet his tone carried a kind of conviction that made her heart stutter. Where are you taking me? She managed. Home, he said simply. I don't have a home. His jaw tightened. You do now. The rest of the drive passed in silence. When the car finally stopped, Aria's eyes widened. The place before her wasn't a house. It was a fortress carved into the side of a mountain. Stone towers rose into the fog, their windows glowing with soft amber light. Ancient runes shimmered faintly along the walls, humming with old magic. 2 massive wolves, pure white, eyes glowing blue, guarded the entrance gates. They bowed their heads as Kyle stepped out. The gesture sent a chill through Aria's spine. He extended a hand to her, palm open, steady. She hesitated only a second before taking it. His skin was warm, almost hot. His grip firm yet careful, as if afraid she might break. Inside, the palace was breathtaking. Vaulted ceilings, sweeping staircases, chandeliers carved from crystal and bone. But what struck Aria most wasn't the grandeur. It was the silence. No footsteps, no laughter, no life. It felt like a kingdom frozen in time. Kale led her through long corridors lined with portraits of past rulers, each one with eyes the same molten gold as his. They stopped before a tall oak door, carved with intricate wolves running through a moonlit forest. "This will be your room," he said. He pushed the door open, and Aria stepped into a suite that made her head spin. A bed draped in fur, windows overlooking endless forest, a fire already burning in the hearth. A tray of food waited on the table. Fresh fruit, warm bread, a silver pot of tea. "Eat," Kale said softly. "Rest. You're safe here. No one will touch you." She turned to him. "Why did you buy me?" He didn't answer at first. His gaze drifted toward the flames, distant, almost haunted. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, fragile beneath the strength. "Because I've seen you before." Aria frowned. "What do you mean?" Kale took a slow step closer. 200 years ago, a witch cursed me. She said I'd live forever, but never find my mate. Every night since then, I've dreamed of a girl. Brown hair, green eyes, a laugh that could quiet the storm inside me. I thought it was just the curse tormenting me. He looked at her then, and the world seemed to tilt. Until I saw you on that stage. Aria's lips parted. "You think I'm her? The girl from your dreams?" Kyle's voice cracked. "No, I don't think. I know." The firelight flickered across his face, softening the edges of the man everyone feared. For a heartbeat, he didn't look like a king or a monster. He looked human, broken. Aria's chest tightened. "That's impossible. I'm human. I don't even have a wolf." Kyle smiled faintly, though sadness lingered in his eyes. "Fate doesn't care what we are." She took a step back, the words sinking into her like a slow poison. "You don't know me. You don't even know my name." His gaze followed her retreat, but he didn't move closer. "I've known it all my life. Aria Winters." Her blood ran cold. How do you know that?" He just looked at her, and for a second she could have sworn the golden light in his eyes flickered, like he was seeing someone else through her. "I've watched you grow up," he said. "Through dreams, through time. I know the way you bite your lip when you're scared, the way you hum when you read, the way you still believe in kindness, even when the world doesn't deserve it." Her legs felt weak. "That's not possible." Kale stepped forward, slow, cautious, his voice barely above a whisper. "Everything about you is impossible." The room fell silent except for the crackle of fire. For a moment she forgot where she was, forgot that she'd been sold, forgot everything but the strange warmth spreading in her chest. Then he turned away. "Rest. Tomorrow we'll talk. For tonight, just breathe." He started to leave, but paused at the door. "Aria?" She looked up. "You don't belong to anyone," he said softly. "Not even me." The door closed behind him, and in the flicker of firelight, Aria sat in a palace built for gods, wearing a king's coat that still smelled like his skin, trying to decide if she'd been rescued or captured by destiny itself. The night was too quiet, too vast. Aria sat on the edge of the enormous bed, staring at the flames that danced in the marble fireplace. She hadn't moved in hours. The food had gone cold. Her tea untouched. The gown Kyle's attendants had left for her lay across a chair, silken and soft, mocking her exhaustion. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to feel safe here. And yet, something about this place whispered to her bones. The coat he'd left her still hung around her shoulders. Every time she tried to take it off, the scent, pine, rain, smoke, pulled her back to that moment on the stage. The moment he looked at her, as if the world had stopped turning. She whispered his name into the empty room. Cale. The sound of it felt forbidden, powerful. Aria stood and wandered to the window. The view stole her breath. Endless forest spread below, blanketed in fog, silvered by moonlight. In the distance, wolves ran along the ridgeline, dark shadows weaving between the trees. Their howls rolled across the mountains, low and haunting, like a song older than language itself. For the first time since her parents' death, something inside her stirred. Not fear, not grief, something deeper. Recognition. She touched the glass. "What are you?" she whispered. "And why do I feel like I've seen you before?" When she finally lay down, the exhaustion hit her all at once. The kind of fatigue that came from crying too long, from thinking too much. Her eyes closed, and the world slipped away. Then she was running. Barefoot through a forest she didn't recognize but somehow knew. Branches clawed at her arms. The air burned cold in her lungs. Behind her, something growled, low, guttural, too close. She glanced back and saw nothing but red eyes glinting in the darkness. Her legs ached, her heartbeat thundered. The ground trembled beneath her. She tripped on a root, fell, and rolled across damp leaves. When she looked up, a massive wolf stood before her. Black fur, shoulders broad as armor, eyes blazing gold. The creature stepped closer, growling at the shadows behind her. Then it lunged, not at her, but at the thing that had been chasing her. The forest exploded with noise, claws and teeth and roars. When it was over, the red eyes were gone. The wolf turned back to her, panting. Blood streaked its fur, but its eyes were calm. Familiar. Kyle's eyes. "I'll always find you," a voice whispered inside her head. "Even in nightmares." Aria woke, gasping, drenched in sweat, her heart hammering. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the room. The door creaked. Kyle stood there barefoot, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "You screamed," he said quietly. "I heard you from the other wing." Aria clutched the sheets. It was just a dream. He stepped closer, studying her face like she was something fragile. "Was I in it?" Her voice trembled. "You were the wolf." Cale exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and disbelief. "Then it's begun." "What's begun?" He moved to the window, gazing out at the forest. "The connection. The curse linked us through dreams long before we met. I thought it would end when I found you, but it seems fate has other plans." Aria pulled the blanket tighter. "You're saying we share dreams?" He turned, his expression raw. "I'm saying I saw that forest, too. I killed that creature. I felt your fear." Her stomach flipped. "That's impossible." "I stopped believing in impossible 2 centuries ago." Silence settled between them. Cale's eyes softened as he looked at her. "You don't have to understand it now. Just know you're not alone anymore." He turned to leave, but Aria's voice stopped him. "Cale, before the auction, why were you even there?" His shoulders stiffened. "I was investigating an illegal trade network. Humans being sold to packs. When I saw you on that stage." He shook his head. My wolf nearly lost control. Every instinct screamed that if I didn't claim you, I'd lose you again. Aria's breath caught. Again? His gaze met hers. You've died in my dreams 1,000 times, Aria. Every time I reached for you, you vanished. Every time I tried to save you, I woke up alone. She stared at him, speechless. The pain in his voice didn't sound like madness. It sounded like truth. Kale's tone softened. The witch wanted me to suffer. To see my mate and never touch her. To crave what I could never have. But she didn't understand something. What? That eternity means patience, and I'd wait 1,000 more years if it led me to you. Her chest tightened. She wanted to argue, to call him delusional, to scream that she wasn't his. But part of her, the part that had seen those golden eyes in her own dreams for years, didn't want to. Instead, she whispered, I've dreamed of you, too. Kyle froze. When I was little, she continued, I used to dream of a wolf, black fur, gold eyes. He always stood between me and the dark. I thought I made him up. Kale's voice broke. You didn't. Neither of them spoke after that. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was full, heavy, with something unnamed. Finally, Kale straightened. Rest, Aria. Tomorrow we'll talk more. But tonight, try to dream of something peaceful. He started to leave, but before the door closed, Aria whispered, Kale. He paused. Thank you, she said softly, for coming. For the first time, the Alpha King smiled, a small, quiet smile that made his golden eyes glow like dawn. Always, he said. The door shut, and Aria lay back down. Her body trembled, her heart refused to slow, and outside the window, a single wolf howled beneath the moon, low, mournful, and eternal. The morning light in the northern palace was different, pale gold, soft, and quiet. It touched the edges of the velvet curtains, spilling over the floor like liquid sunlight. Aria woke to the sound of distant birds and the faint murmur of water running through the fountains outside. For the first time in years, she hadn't woken up afraid. But that peace didn't last long. When she opened her eyes, she found a note folded neatly on the nightstand beside her bed. Thick parchment, ink the color of midnight. The handwriting, strong, precise, was Kale's. Breakfast is served in the East Conservatory. K. Simple, direct. And yet, her pulse quickened. She dressed slowly, avoiding the mirror. The silk gown left for her the night before still felt too fine for someone who'd been auctioned off like property only days ago. When she finally stepped into the hall, 2 guards bowed as she passed. The gesture made her stomach twist. Respect was the last thing she wanted. The East Conservatory looked like something out of a dream. Glass walls opening to the mountain view, wildflowers blooming in planters that seemed to grow from the stone itself. A table waited near the window, filled with fruits, pastries, and steaming tea. Kale was already there. He looked up from a pile of documents when she entered. Good morning, he said softly. Aria hesitated at the threshold. You didn't have to. I did. He gestured to the chair across from him. Please, she sat. The chair felt too soft, the food too perfect. You don't have to treat me like what? His gaze was steady. Like I'm something precious. Kale leaned forward. You are. Her breath caught. She looked away. You don't even know who I am. His voice softened. That's what we're going to change. They ate in silence for a while, Aria too tense to taste anything, Kyle lost in thought. When he finally spoke, his tone shifted. Serious. Controlled. I've been looking into your past, he said. Into the night your parents died. Her fork froze mid-air. Why? Because the story doesn't make sense. He slid a folder across the table. Rogue attacks are chaotic, but your parents' deaths, too clean, too quiet, and there were no witnesses. Her heart began to pound. I don't understand. Richard Winters, Cale continued, wasn't just a businessman. He worked with a syndicate that laundered money through human and wolf trafficking. Your father, David Sterling, was a financial officer for the Northern Territories. He discovered the theft. He tried to expose it. Aria's breath trembled. You're saying Richard had them killed? The world tilted. The air left her lungs. She shook her head. No. He raised me. He took care of me. Cale's eyes softened. He kept you close to hide what he'd done. If anyone ever suspected, he could say, Look, I even took in their daughter. The truth landed like a blade through her chest. Every memory of Richard flashed before her eyes. His stern lectures, his cold affection, the way he always locked his study door, the way he never let her see old family photos. All those years she'd believed she owed him her life, and all along he'd been polishing the chains he'd built for her. Aria pushed away from the table, trembling. No, I can't. This can't be true. Kyle stood, moving toward her slowly, careful not to touch. I'm sorry. I wouldn't have told you if I wasn't certain. Her knees gave out. She sank into the nearest chair, her voice barely a whisper. He killed them, my parents, and then he raised me like some kind of trophy. Cale's jaw tightened, fury flashing in his eyes. He will answer for it. She looked up sharply. No. His expression darkened. Aria. No, she said again, stronger this time. You don't get to avenge me. Not this. This isn't your wound. He hesitated, torn between rage and restraint. Then what do you want to do? Her hands curled into fists. I want him to see me. To see what he created. To know he didn't destroy me. And then, I want to be the one to end it. Cale studied her, silent for a long time. Then he nodded once, slow and solemn. Then we'll do it your way. The quiet between them stretched. Outside, the wind howled through the mountains, carrying the faint echo of wolves in the distance. Kyle reached into his jacket, pulled out a black envelope, and placed it on the table. Theron has already found him. He's in the southern ports, trying to flee the continent. He won't get far. Aria stared at the envelope, at the life it contained, the life that had stolen hers. Her chest ached with something fierce and burning. Cale spoke again, his tone low. When you're ready, I'll bring him here. You'll face him on your terms, not as a slave, not as a victim, as the Luna you were meant to be. Aria looked up, tears streaking her cheeks, her voice barely a whisper. Why are you helping me? Kyle's answer was simple. Because your pain is mine. For a long moment neither of them moved. Outside the wolves howled again, long mournful notes that carried across the valley like a promise. Aria wiped her face, her eyes hardening with resolve. Then it's time, she said quietly. Let him see what he turned me into. And as Kyle's golden eyes met hers, something shifted, something ancient and unstoppable. The girl who had been sold was gone. What remained was a queen in the making. The throne room was silent. Not the kind of silence that came from peace, but the kind that came before a storm. Tall windows let in streaks of moonlight, pale and cold, cutting through the dark like silver blades. Guards lined the marble walls, their armor gleaming under the flicker of torchlight. At the center of it all, Cale Thorne sat on his throne, stone and iron, carved with wolves and roses, his presence so still it was terrifying. The heavy doors groaned open. 2 enforcers dragged Richard Winters into the room, his hands bound, his face pale and bruised. The arrogance he once wore like perfume was gone. The man who'd sold his daughter for money now looked like what he truly was, weak, mortal, afraid. Aria stood beside Kyle, dressed in black from neck to heel. The gown flowed like smoke, catching the firelight as she stepped forward. Her hair was pinned back, her chin lifted, her eyes sharp enough to cut. She no longer looked like the broken girl from the auction. She looked like judgment. Richard stumbled, struggling to kneel. His eyes darted to Cale, then to her. Aria, my God, what is this? What's going on? I thought you were... Sold? Her voice was calm, steady, and cold. Yes, that's what you thought, didn't you? He blinked rapidly, shaking his head. I didn't mean for it to go that far. It was business, you have to understand. Business? Aria's laugh was bitter. You sold me like furniture, like I was just another item on your inventory list. Kyle's voice cut through the air, deep and commanding. Enough. Richard froze. Cale rose from his throne. Even standing still, his presence filled the entire hall. Richard Winters, you are accused of murder, embezzlement, and trafficking. Do you deny it? Richard swallowed hard. I didn't kill anyone. I was desperate. Your Majesty, please, I was trying to survive. Aria took a step forward. Her hands were trembling, but her voice wasn't. You murdered my parents. You stole their money. Then you raised me in their house so you could feel like a savior. He looked at her, and for a brief moment she saw it, the flicker of guilt. But it died just as quickly. I gave you everything, he said. A home, an education. I fed you, clothed you. You fed me lies. Her voice cracked. You made me thank you every day for saving me, when the only thing you saved was your reputation. You let me call you father when you were the monster who killed mine. Richard's composure crumbled. He fell to his knees, sobbing. Please, Aria, I didn't want to hurt you. I was trying to protect you. If they'd found out what I did... She cut him off, her words sharp as glass. Don't you dare twist this into protection. You didn't raise me out of love. You raised me out of guilt. Cale's gaze never left her. He watched her, silent, letting her take control of her own justice. Aria stepped closer, stopping only inches from her former father. The light from the torches cast her shadow over him. Do you know what it feels like to be powerless? She asked quietly. To look at someone you trust and realize they never saw you as a person? Richard's lips trembled. I made mistakes. No, she whispered. You made choices. She turned to Kyle then, her eyes glistening but fierce. He doesn't deserve mercy. Kyle inclined his head, his voice like thunder wrapped in velvet. As you wish. 2 guards stepped forward. Richard's sobs turned into frantic pleas. No, please, I can pay it back. I can make this right. Aria looked down at him one last time. There's nothing you can pay that will bring them back, or erase what you did to me. She stepped back. Her face was calm now, almost peaceful. Take him away. The guards dragged him from the throne room, his cries echoing through the stone halls until they faded into silence. Aria didn't watch him go. She didn't need to. The moment the doors closed, her strength faltered. The weight of everything she'd just done crashed down on her shoulders. Her knees almost gave out, but Cale was there, catching her before she fell. He didn't speak, didn't try to tell her it was over, or that she'd done the right thing. He simply held her, his warmth pressed against her, solid and real. She buried her face in his chest, the tears she'd held back finally breaking free. It's over, she whispered, her voice raw. Cale's arms tightened around her. No, he said softly. It's just beginning. For a long while they stayed like that, silent in the echo of justice. When Aria finally pulled back, her face was pale but composed. What now? She asked quietly. Kyle brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Now, you stop surviving. His golden eyes glowed faintly in the firelight. Now, you start living. She looked up at him, searching his face for something. Certainty, peace, maybe forgiveness. But what she found was understanding. He wasn't her savior. He wasn't her captor. He was something far more dangerous. He was the one who saw her not as broken, but as becoming. And for the first time in her life, Aria didn't feel small. She felt powerful. Outside, the night wind rose, carrying the low, mournful howls of wolves through the valley. The past had been buried in blood and truth. Now only the future waited, wild, unknown, and hers. Night fell quietly over the palace, wrapping the mountains in a hush that felt sacred. The sky was deep blue velvet scattered with 1,000 stars that blinked like silent witnesses to what the world below had endured. Aria stood on the balcony of her chamber, staring into the forest, the cold air brushing her face. The weight of what had happened pressed heavy against her chest. Richard was gone. Justice, if that's what it could be called, had been served. Yet, instead of relief, she felt hollow. The rage that had once burned in her veins was gone. Leaving behind a fragile silence, she wrapped Cale's coat tighter around herself, though she wasn't sure if she was cold or just empty. Her body trembled from exhaustion, from grief she hadn't allowed herself to feel until now. The door opened softly behind her. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. His scent, smoke, pine, and winter, moved toward her like a memory she couldn't escape. Couldn't sleep? Kyle's voice was low, steady, but gentler than she'd ever heard it. Aria shook her head, still looking at the horizon. I don't know how to sleep after something like that. Kyle stepped beside her, the silence between them thick, but not uncomfortable. He leaned against the balcony railing, his golden eyes catching the light of the moon. You did what most can't, he said. You faced the person who broke you, and you didn't let him take the last piece of your soul. Aria let out a shaky breath. Then why do I feel so empty? He turned to her. Because vengeance doesn't heal. It only stops the bleeding. She met his gaze, and for the first time since the throne room, her eyes softened. Then what does heal, Kyle? His expression darkened slightly, not with anger, but something deeper. Pain. Connection, he said simply. Finding something, or someone, that reminds you why you survived. Their eyes held. The wind whispered through the trees. The space between them felt electric, charged with something ancient and dangerous. I don't know who I am anymore, she whispered. He took everything I thought was real. Cale moved closer, his voice a low murmur. Then start over. Be who you want to be. You're Aria Sterling, daughter of the people he tried to erase. You're fire in human skin. Her throat tightened. You make it sound so easy. It's not. He reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek with the back of his knuckle. But you're not alone anymore. Her breath caught. The world seemed to narrow until there was only him, the warmth of his hand, the glow of his eyes, the faint pulse of his heart so close to hers. Why me, Kyle? She whispered. Why did it have to be me? His jaw tightened. Because fate doesn't choose the perfect. It chooses the willing. And you. His voice softened, breaking slightly. You've carried a strength even you don't see. She didn't answer. She couldn't. The ache inside her was too raw, so she let herself lean into him, just enough for his hand to settle on her back. For a long while, neither spoke. The forest howled softly beneath them. The stars seemed to hum. When she finally looked up, her voice was almost a whisper. You said once that I'm your salvation. Kyle nodded slowly. You are. How can I save someone who's supposed to be immortal? He smiled faintly, a sadness flickering in his eyes. Immortality isn't life, Aria. It's just waiting. Centuries of watching everything fade, hoping something might make it feel worth it again. Then you appeared. Her heart thudded, heavy and loud. You talk like you've been waiting for me your whole life. I have. The words were so quiet, they barely broke the air, but they wrapped around her like a vow. Cale reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the edges of her jaw. You're not my prisoner, he said softly. You never were. You're my mate, the one thing I wasn't supposed to find. Aria's breath trembled. I'm human, Kyle. I can't be your mate. His lips curved in a faint, aching smile. The moon goddess doesn't care what we are. Sometimes she ties souls instead of blood. Something inside her cracked. For years she had been unwanted, unloved, unseen. And here was a man who looked at her like she was divine. Her body moved before her mind could stop it. One step closer, then another. When he kissed her, it wasn't gentle. It was inevitable. His mouth found hers like he'd been starving for centuries. The world seemed to tilt, the wind rising around them, the firelight from her chamber flaring behind the glass. His hand tangled in her hair, his other arm circling her waist, pulling her against him. Aria's breath hitched, and the sound only deepened the kiss. Her fingers fisted in the front of his shirt, holding on as if letting go would shatter something sacred. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, the world was silent. Cale's eyes glowed brighter, golden and wild, his voice barely more than a growl. Mine, he whispered. Aria stared up at him, her lips trembling, her heart a thunderstorm in her chest. Then, slowly, she smiled. A real smile, small but sure. Yours, she breathed. The word hung between them soft and certain. Kyle exhaled, resting his forehead against hers. The bond has already begun, he said. Do you feel it? She closed her eyes. A warmth spread through her chest, faint but steady, a pulse that wasn't her own. Yes, she whispered. I feel you. The night swallowed their silence. Far below, the wolves of the northern territories lifted their voices to the moon, howls that sounded almost like celebration. And for the first time in her life, Aria didn't feel broken. She felt chosen. Morning came with whispers and judgment. The palace, once silent, now buzzed with voices, some curious, some angry. Aria could feel their eyes even before she stepped out of her chamber. The rumor had spread through the northern territories like wildfire. The Alpha King had chosen a human as his mate. Every servant who bowed did so too quickly. Every guard who met her gaze looked away just as fast. Even the air felt different, thicker, colder. Cale had warned her. They will test you, he'd said the night before. They won't believe you belong here. You'll have to make them see you're more than what they think you are. She hadn't expected it to happen so soon. When the summons came, it was from the Wolf Council itself, the ancient circle of alphas who advised the throne. 7 of them, older than most kingdoms, wise and cruel in equal measure. The guards escorted her to the great hall, where Kyle already stood at the base of his throne. His presence was thunder in still air. Golden eyes blazing, jaw locked, posture unbending. But even his power couldn't erase the tension in the room. Elder Magda, the oldest of the council, rose to speak. Her silver hair fell in perfect waves over a cloak of midnight fur, her eyes cold as frost. Your Majesty, she began, we've heard the whispers. Is it true? You've chosen this human as your Luna? Cale's voice was steady. It's not a rumor. It's truth. Murmurs rippled through the room. Aria felt them, tiny knives hidden in every breath. Elder Magda tilted her head. Forgive me, my king, but the moon goddess does not bless humans with the bond. It is against nature. Cale's tone sharpened. And yet, nature bends for her, All eyes turned to Aria, the weight of centuries of tradition pressed down on her, daring her to flinch. She didn't. She lifted her chin, meeting Magda's gaze head-on. "I don't expect your acceptance," she said quietly, "but I will earn your respect." A faint smirk touched the elder's lips. How noble. But respect is not given, child. It is proven. Kale's patience cracked. "Enough! You question me, you question the throne." Magda raised a hand. "Not the throne, your majesty. The Luna." Her eyes gleamed. "Let her prove herself. 3 trials. If she passes, we will kneel. If she fails—" Kyle's growl cut through her words. "She won't." Aria touched his arm, her voice calm but firm. "Let them test me." Kyle turned to her, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "Aria!" She met his gaze, steady and unyielding. "You said I belong here. Let me show them why." For a moment no one spoke. Then Magda smiled faintly. "So be it. The trial of thorns begins at dawn." The first test was combat. The arena stood beneath the open sky, ringed with stone walls and torches that burned even under the rising sun. The council sat above on a terrace, their expressions unreadable. Kyle watched from his throne, fury simmering beneath his calm exterior. Aria stood barefoot in the sand, her hair braided tightly, wearing simple training leathers. Across from her, a towering beta wolf waited, broad-shouldered, confident, the faint glimmer of a smirk curling his lips. "You sure you want to do this, human?" he taunted. "Wouldn't want to bruise the king's little pet." Aria's heart pounded, but she didn't let it show. She remembered Theron's lessons from the last few days, the way he'd taught her to use speed, not strength. To think, not react. The whistle blew. The beta lunged. Aria ducked low, his arm grazing past her head. She pivoted, used his momentum against him, and drove her elbow into his ribs. The crowd gasped, the beta snarled, spinning, but she was faster. 2 more dodges, a quick sweep of her leg. He hit the ground hard, sand exploding beneath him. Aria pressed the wooden blade Theron had given her against his throat, her breath ragged but steady. "Yield," she said softly. The beta glared up at her, then, slowly, nodded. The crowd erupted. Kale's lips curved just slightly, pride flickering in his eyes. The second trial was strategy. 2 rival alphas stood before her, both shouting over territory rights, an old dispute meant to test her diplomacy. She listened carefully, tracing their words, the tension, the pride behind their anger. When they paused, she stepped forward. "You both hunt the same lands, but your boundaries overlap. Redraw them. Share the center territory as neutral ground. Let it feed both packs and none will go hungry." The room fell silent. Then one alpha gave a short nod. The other followed. Magda's sharp gaze softened, just barely. "Interesting?" she murmured. The third and final trial came at dusk. Leadership. Aria was given a squad of young warriors and a simulated rescue mission. A kidnapped pup hidden within the forest maze. Every path was a trick. Every mistake could cost her team points. She didn't try to lead by command. She listened, asked questions, trusted them. When one stumbled, she helped. When another hesitated, she encouraged. By the time they reached the final chamber, every wolf under her command had stopped calling her human. They called her Luna. When they emerged, victorious and exhausted, Kyle was waiting. His smile was quiet but radiant, like the sun breaking through storm clouds. Elder Magda rose, her silver eyes shining not with scorn, but with respect. "Aria Sterling," she said slowly, "you've proven strength, wisdom, and leadership. The council accepts you as Luna." The hall erupted in cheers. Kale crossed the floor to her, his gaze softening as he stopped before her. "Told you," he murmured, his voice low enough for her alone. They'd see what I saw. Aria's smile trembled, her throat thick with emotion. You were right, she whispered back. Cale brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch reverent. They may call you human, Aria, but to me, you've always been royal. And in that moment, beneath the roaring crowd, beneath the light of the setting sun, Aria realized she wasn't surviving anymore. She was leading. The palace was alive that night. Every torch burned brighter, every wall seemed to hum with anticipation. The full moon hung above the northern territories like a crown of silver, watching as hundreds of wolves gathered below the great hall. Alphas, betas, omegas, every rank, every house had come to witness the impossible. A human was about to become Luna Queen. Aria stood before her mirror, her reflection unrecognizable. Gone was the terrified girl from the auction block. The woman staring back wore a gown of midnight blue silk threaded with silver moons. Her hair fell in soft waves, crowned with white winter roses. Her eyes, once dull with fear, now glowed with quiet fire. Lyra, Cale's younger sister, tightened the last clasp on her corset and smiled. You're shaking, she teased softly. Aria breathed out a nervous laugh. I'm not used to people looking at me like I matter. Lyra stepped closer, her hands gentle on Aria's shoulders. You don't just matter, she said. You're about to change everything. A knock sounded on the door. Then Cale entered. The room seemed to tilt with his presence, tall, composed, wrapped in ceremonial black and gold. His collar bore the crest of the Northern Territories, and the light caught the edge of his crown. When he saw her, he stopped mid-step, his usual control faltering. You're breathtaking, he murmured. Aria smiled faintly, though her voice trembled. You clean up pretty well yourself. For a long moment they just stood there, studying each other. Two souls from different worlds, bound by something older than either could name. Then Cale extended his hand. Are you ready? No, she admitted, but I'll go anyway. His lips curved. That's what makes you perfect for this. The great hall doors opened to thunderous howls that rolled through the palace. The room was a cathedral of light, gold and fire reflecting off marble floors. Wolves filled every corner, their eyes gleaming in reverence and curiosity. Aria walked down the long aisle, her heartbeat matching the rhythm of the drums that echoed through the hall. Every step was a memory, the cage, the auction, her father's betrayal, each one carried behind her like ghosts. And yet, none of it weighed her down. Because at the end of the aisle stood Kyle. He waited at the altar, tall and still, the firelight wrapping around him like armor. When their eyes met, the rest of the world vanished. She reached him, and he took her hands, his thumb tracing small circles over her skin, as if to steady them both. The ceremony began. Elder Magda stood between them, her voice carrying clear and strong. Tonight, under the moon goddess's gaze, the bond between King and Luna shall be sealed, not by blood, but by soul. Cale's golden eyes softened. Aria Sterling, he said, voice low but filled with emotion. You were stolen from me by time and curse, but you fought your way back through pain and fate. You are the bravest soul I've ever known. I vow to protect you, to honor you, to never let another hand harm you. You are my queen, my heart, my home. Tears filled Aria's eyes. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried through the hall like wind through leaves. Cale Thorne, you found me in my darkest hour and didn't just save me. You saw me. You showed me that love isn't about power or blood, but choice. I vow to stand beside you, to fight for you, and to love you with everything I am. You're my peace after the storm. The hall was silent. Then Elder Magda stepped forward, holding a silver dagger. Do you accept the mark? She asked. Kale's eyes burned gold. Always. Aria tilted her head, exposing her neck. The bite came quick, a sharp pain that turned into heat, light, connection. A rush of something wild surged through her body, flooding every nerve, every heartbeat. When Kale lifted his head, a faint, golden glow pulsed between them. She could feel him, his thoughts, his emotions, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat intertwining with hers. "Can you feel me?" he whispered. Aria nodded, tears falling freely. "Yes, I feel you." The room erupted in howls and cheers, the sound shaking the walls. Elder Magda lifted the crown of silver thorns and placed it on Aria's head. "Rise, Luna Aria Sterlingthorn, Queen of the Northern Territories." Aria stood, the crown gleaming in the moonlight. Kyle took her hand and raised it high. The hall roared again, wolves kneeling, heads bowed, their voices a single, thunderous vow of loyalty. Aria looked out over them all. "I was sold," she began, her voice steady, carrying through the sea of faces. "I was told I was worthless. But I stand before you tonight as proof that fate doesn't care where we begin, only who we choose to become." The room went utterly silent. "I choose to lead with compassion, to protect those who can't protect themselves, to bring peace where there has been only pain. And I choose him, every day, forever." Kyle's hand squeezed hers, his pride radiant, unspoken but clear in his eyes. The drums thundered once more, the wolves howled to the moon, and as the light of the goddess bathed them both, Aria felt it, the certainty that she wasn't fate's victim anymore. She was fate's answer. The girl who'd been sold in darkness now ruled beneath the light, the Luna of a kingdom, the queen of her own story. 6 months had passed since the night the moon crowned her Luna. The palace, once haunted by echoes of fear and judgment, now pulsed with laughter and life. Flowers bloomed along the stone terraces. The howls that once sounded like mourning now rose in harmony, a song of peace that carried through the northern territories. Aria stood in the palace gardens, the scent of jasmine and pine mingling in the air. A gentle breeze lifted her hair as she watched a group of young wolves training under the morning sun, rescued orphans from the same trafficking ring that once sold her. They were safe now. They had a home. She smiled faintly. "We did it," she whispered to herself. From behind her came the familiar sound of footsteps, measured and confident. Kyle wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. His warmth pressed against her back, grounding her. "You're up early," he murmured. "I couldn't sleep." Her voice softened. "I was thinking about them, about how far we've come." Kale followed her gaze. "You've changed everything, Aria. You gave my people something I couldn't. Hope." She turned to face him. The man who'd once ruled like ice now looked at her like she was the only thing that ever mattered. "We did it together," she said. "You showed me that love doesn't erase pain. It transforms it." He smiled, the kind that reached his eyes. "And you showed me that power means nothing without compassion." For a long moment they just stood there, the world quiet except for the rustle of leaves and distant wolf calls. Then Kyle brushed a strand of hair from her face and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You know," he said, teasing, "you never did get used to calling me your mate." She laughed softly. "I think I like calling you mine better." He grinned. "I can live with that." Her expression turned thoughtful. "Do you ever think about the curse?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "But I think it broke the moment you walked into my life." He looked at her, gold eyes glowing in the morning light. "The witch wanted me to suffer, but she gave me eternity to find you. I think that's the part she didn't understand." Aria smiled, tears glimmering in her eyes. then maybe fate isn't cruel after all. Kale leaned closer, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that was slow, certain, and full of everything they'd survived. When they parted, Aria looked out at the mountains, at the pack that now knelt for a queen who had once been caged. "I was sold," she whispered, more to herself than to him, "but I was never broken." Kale took her hand, their fingers intertwining. "No," he said softly, "you were reborn." As the sun rose higher, golden light spilling across their faces, the Luna and her king stood together at the edge of their kingdom, no longer haunted by the past, but leading the future. And somewhere deep in the forest below, a wolf howled, a sound not of sorrow, but of home. From the ashes of betrayal, Aria rose not as a victim, but as a queen. The girl who had been sold found her worth in the heart of a king who had searched for her across centuries. Together, they proved that love born in darkness can still burn brighter than the moon itself. She was sold. She was scarred. But she was never broken. She was chosen. And Kale, her Alpha King, finally found peace in the one soul destiny refused to let him forget. This is what true mate love looks like. Not perfect. Not easy, but powerful. Healing. Eternal. If Aria and Kale's story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Hit subscribe and join the Alpha's Romance Library, where broken girls become queens, where every story burns with fate, devotion, and redemption. Tell me in the comments, would you have trusted the Alpha King after everything? Or would you have walked away? Your Luna is listening. Until next time, may your heart find its fated mate, and may your Alpha always choose you.